Hi there, Tommy here. I'm going to do a little politics kind of talk. My thinking now is it's basically a society and us, and it's our interpretation of it. And what I'm kind of want to talk about is just how we fit into that whole interpretation, and how each individual has basically individualistic kind of characteristics, if you like, towards what society is. Therefore, that can enhances their personality based on their environment. A bit of Darwinic there as well. Also bring a bit of Richard Dawkins in, which talks about the kind of genes kind of passing from person to person, which is interesting. But I want to just kind of mostly concentrate and focus on, is the society good or bad that we have, and this kind of interpretation that we have of it. Like, you have people who are all for it, and people who are like, we are conspiracy type things. David Icke would be one. Yeah, I mean, is he somebody that actually knows the answers? And a lot of people will say yes, because he's already kind of said a lot of the things that are going to happen, all the disasters and stuff. But it's just a shame that they seem to pick on all the disasters and not so much like the good things. And maybe that's our own fault as a society. I'm not going to kind of drift for this too much, but maybe that's our own fault as a society, the fact that we look at the media too much and the media influences us. So, like, for example, the royal baby was born, we know about it. For example, the Prime Minister says something, we know about it. And, you know, train crash happens unfortunately in Spain, we know about it. You know, right away we know about these things almost instantly on phone devices, PCs, tablets, you name it. So we have this kind of media communication all connecting us into a more globalised type way of thinking. And my thing today, and just shortly, I want to just do it in a small time, not a long time, it's just what we think, or what we could think of what society is, and why we're all kind of in it, and why we're kind of, some people have, some people don't, that sort of thing. Now, my own personal opinion at the moment is, it isn't all bad. You know, there is things like, you have these recessions and all the rest of it happening, and various other things. But basically, the main thing to remember is that this is keeping us alive, and we actually have never had it so good. If you look back 100 years to the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, whatever it may be, I mean, you pretty much, you know, you see people walking about in sewerage, mud, no clothes, all the rest of it, and washing things in buckets, you know, on horseback, some people walking for miles. It just goes on, you know. The houses never had any windows, heating, some had leaky roofs, you name it, you know. So have we got it so bad? And if we have, why do we think that? And have we always thought that as a society? Is this a kind of Dawkins type or Dawkinette type thing, where we're passing our genes, behavioural genes, opinions, and that sort of thing, senses, instincts onto onto our children, really, who are then kind of just thinking the same as the past generations? Or are we actually thinking this as a modernity society? Or is it something we just pick up through being told with society's interpretation of history, and we are then kind of part of that kind of wheel that cogs round to kind of churn out the kind of people we are in this kind of present time? But anyway, where I want to go with everything is, what we have here, is it real or not real type thing? You know, is this a real quality type way of living? And obviously we keep striving to be better. Our scientists, our academics, our politicians really do keep striving to make better things for us. It's just a shame that sometimes they seem to cream the top off first for themselves and then see what's left for us, and that could be a fault in that whole kind of way of working. Although I would argue it is getting better, because if you look back, as I say, 100 years ago, or even if you go back 1,000 years ago, even when the Egyptians were making the pyramids, you know, you'd probably see that society was similar to what we have now, still in that perennial line where nothing really changes apart from technologies. But at the same time, you have people, you need people who actually work, you need people to rule, you need people to have skills like build houses, shoes, all the rest of it. You know, you pretty much, it's not changed, but we've never had it so good, we're told. The Egyptians, when they built the pyramids, treated other people really well. They built the pyramids, they actually were part of the first civilisations within that kind of bit of land, and they're very well treated, fed, watered, kept. The happy workers made good pyramids, and they're still standing today, which is a testament to that. But what happened once they were built is they kind of killed them all. Yeah. So when you think about that, the fact that they treated them well, and then when they had no further use for them, that was them out for account, you know, they were gone. And you look at our present society, if nothing's really changed, we still build things with bricks. We still look at we look at art. We still paint. The Egyptians done that. We still make sculptures. The Egyptians done that. We still talk to each other, communicate verbally. The Egyptians done that. We still have pets. We have cats, dogs. Egyptians had that, and so on and so on. We still had different kind of wildlife as well. And all these things still exist. We still have clouds, we still have sky. Nothing's really changed. And if you think then, if we are living in a way where we are useful right now, what happens when we don't become useful anymore? Do we then be non-existent as well? And who actually makes that decision? That's just a wee thought. But on a brighter side, without depressing you too much on all that, I'm beginning to look at things in a nicer light, because I'm beginning to see it now as if I'm just waving at the camera. I'm beginning to see it now as if we actually live in a really good time, and the people who are in power, although they may actually look as if they're harsh, cutting back, especially in Britain, America's quite bad too for that, cutting back and so on, we actually not so much living a democracy, because we're not really free. We are ruled and controlled, but we're kind of pretend there's a democracy there of some kind. But what we are is we actually have stuff that actually keeps us alive longer. And if you look at the stats on that, it's pretty much people living to 100 years of age, 126 years of age. I think the guy in China recently actually died 126 years of age. I mean, we have so much abilities now, and I think it's our physical abilities is coming through our environment, which Darwin would say we're actually evolving to that, and it means that we've got a longer longitude of life, and we wouldn't have had that 100 years ago. People would have lived to maybe 80, and people have lived to about 80, 100 years ago, 200 years ago and so on, but only very few. But with the population growing, I think for the 1950s upwards, I think we actually have gained a couple of billion people. I think it's 4 billion or 5 billion we've created. I was laughing because they're waving. My point of all this is we have got so much stretched resources. We've got so many people in the world compared to where it was years ago. Things were really bad years ago. People were quite cruel as well to each other, and they had that kind of state of nature kicking in, the kind of Hobbesian kind of idea of things, where people are brutish to each other, they try and kill each other for belongings and so on. And we've had in the last 500-600 years these kind of philosophers like John Locke, political theorists like Hobbes and so on. Jeremy Bentham was a big influence as well, John Stuart Mill. These guys all kind of put thoughts in their head that actually made us evolve into the type of society that we're in right now, and the way that we actually act is to do all these principles that these guys created, whereas before that you wouldn't have had that. So society in us, what's our interpretation of it? I mean, my observation of it from my own personal interpretation is people go about the streets, the shopping centres, or houses, and they're constantly inundated with basically signs saying, I don't know, HMV, Microsoft, maybe Pepsi, Cola, whatever it may be. They're all over the house, they're all over the streets, they're all over the shopping centres. People are influenced by this kind of marketing type ploy right now, especially since after post World War, when basically your kitchen became the kitchen. What it is now, that it started to evolve. Maybe in America they had it in 1930s, they had that kind of kitchen evolving. You have your sink, your worktops and so on, and your basic kind of things. The 50s started getting more technology and all the rest of it, and basically that was the start of this kind of more domesticated society, where we have a more kind of controlled way of looking at things. We think of hygiene, we think of personal kind of preservation, we think of our family's preservation, and coming from, and if you go back maybe 150 to 100 years, you go to kind of gender divisions as well, where you have industrial revolution dividing gender into male, females, basically male goods and works in the factory, just because they're the strongest, and the female will stay at home, look after the family. And the marketing people have actually caught on to that post World War, and they had it before that. John Watson, obviously the behaviourist, 1912 I think it was, he came about with things eventually. Before he had it before that as well, but he was one of the first to work out how to basically people behave towards things, like stimuli that gives them a reward. And one of them would be, like, if you see a Coca-Cola sign, you'd automatically think of maybe Coca-Cola, and you think go and buy Coca-Cola, and that's part of Pavlov and Skinner's type conditioning type stuff. Also a bit of operant conditioning there as well, where your kind of stimuli makes you salivate, and the salivation would be that your thought of Coca-Cola would make you go and actually buy Coca-Cola, so you already can taste it before you can buy it, which is like maybe an example for the kitchen would be the wife's cooking or the man's cooking in the kitchen a nice dinner, and what happens then is you smell it and you think, wow, can't wait for that, and you start to salivate. It means your saliva starts going, and you start to feel hunger, and the reward is there and so on, so you begin to kind of build your kind of instinct up towards eating and fulfilling that kind of reward system that you're kind of placing upon yourself. And it's almost like, as Freud would say, your id, the kind of selfish thing kind of like coming into play there, because you really have to eat to survive. And the reason I say all of that is because survival's the key in all this. Society is designed, I would say, right now so that we all can survive, and the examples of maybe Egypt, maybe the post-world wars 1 and 2, 1 especially, there's so many people died there, but 2 was like the worst for the political arena, because what's happened for that is like the political arena had to get their act together and went in this more supranational way of thinking, where they've put together NATO and all these places, and eventually the UN for peacekeeping missions, so that they can actually keep the world the way it is. And society as we know it is based on all these past events, and the perennial line isn't really broken, but the idea is you don't make the same mistakes of the past. Hence you need to know the knowledge of the past so that you can actually understand how to avoid making the mistakes again. And I think that's why we have this society we have now, which is more peaceful in our domain, not so much in other people's domain in other parts of the world. Other parts of the world could constitute, for example, Iraq, Afghanistan, there's 2, but we did cause it there, no question. And the bottom line is, the minute America hurt Baghdad, that was the sign of power. When they didn't take into consideration that the people I mentioned earlier, the supranational organisations like NATO or the UN, they didn't take into consideration them. They asked them, and Britain was in the same boat as America. They did try to get it through that they could go and take care of Saddam Hussein, but they never done it. Never get the approval, so they went and just done it anyway. They went and attacked, and that was a sign of America's power. So our society has evolved from the people who were the allies, if you like, in the last 90 years, from First World War to Second, 60 years ago. And we've evolved from the allies to people who are actually going out there and doing what we want in some respect in the name of democracy and peace. And that is why the interpretation that we'll have in our society as we know it in our bubble, which is Britain, America and so on, is peace, and we have a nice quiet life, and we've got time to moan when we don't have things, because we say we can't get a job, or can't get a job, it's shocking, but we've got systems there to kind of prop us up. If we can't get a house, I can't get a house, but there's systems there to get you a house quick. These are first order material needs. Basic post-materialism come for the post-Second World War, and these things are put in place so that we actually have the time to moan. We actually can look at these second order things. We can actually appreciate why we want the things we want, because we know better. We know that we need these things because we know what it tastes like or feels like to have them. So the particular society we live in, you could argue is a bubble, and your interpretation of it is in a way kind of manufactured, constructed and materialised so that we, as why the most powerful nations on earth, which is like I think richest as well, which is Britain's the 6th richest the last time I looked, we can actually function without actually being threatened. And that was why, if you go back to the Baghdad example, where we looked at America hitting Baghdad that time, way back in the Iraq War, the second one, that was their sign of power, and how we've actually positioned ourselves since the last couple of wars, the main world wars, how we positioned ourselves to actually have some sort of strength in the world, regardless of your supranational organisation like NATO or the UN. We actually are the powerful people. But we have China coming through, and this is where the future might hold us differently, because China might actually change the way that we actually work, and especially when China's gave loans to America to prop America up, then that's the first sign